Hi, Mark Jamin here, Medical Director for the Haywood County Health Department, and I cannot tell you how nice it is to have room to stretch out. Well, anyway, today let's talk about contact tracing. And with the rise in cases that we're having, it's becoming even more important. So hang with me till the end because it will become clear why you don't want to get infected or even be exposed. So first, some terms. Isolation refers to a person who is infected and has symptoms, separating themselves from anyone else to avoid exposing others. Quarantine refers to a person with a close exposure who does not have symptoms, separating themselves from anyone else in case they're infected. So isolation, person with symptoms; quarantine, person without symptoms. And in our daily updates, we are now focusing on the number of people isolated and quarantined, as this reflects the current situation we are facing. So, what does it mean if you get sick and test positive with COVID? Well, isolation for at best 10 days, and then only if you have had at least 3 days with no fever, off anything that would suppress a fever, and as long as symptoms are improving. Longer if these criteria are not met, and that's the CDC guidance. 10 days because that's how long viable virus has been cultured from infected people. The goal is to not expose others. So it's super important to isolate as soon as any symptom that could even remotely be COVID appears. Why? Because a person is most contagious to others in the first few days of symptoms. So if you wait even a few days to see what happens, you will have infected others and keep the virus spreading. So during isolation, you would need to stay away from everyone. Most importantly, your family, because inside families is where we are seeing a lot of cases. During that time, the health department follows along daily to make sure everything is going okay and to see if you might need any social support and resources. There is, I should say, also a CDC-based strategy that uses testing, but it's not preferred. And the reason is that a person can test positive well after they are no longer contagious to others, because the test can still pick up virus particles that are not viable, but that hang around long after the person is recovered. So at best, with a positive test, you will be out of work no less than 10 days. And it's still unclear whether you are now even going to be safe from being infected again. So what about quarantine? The key is whether it is a close exposure to a known person who's positive. And this is defined as within 6 feet for longer than 15 minutes without protection, which means without wearing a mask. So, casually passing by someone is not a close exposure. But in a closed space, indoors, loud, and in a crowd, 6 feet may not be enough. Close contacts are determined starting 2 days before symptoms began in the person they were exposed to, because a person sheds virus before they get ill. So what this means is you do not know who this person is. It could be anyone. So quarantine for a close contact is 14 days. That's the incubation period of the virus. And that's the same whether you would go on to test positive or negative, because a negative may well be a false negative. We know that if you haven't developed symptoms by day 14, you're in the clear. We test contacts around day 5 to 6 after their exposure because it takes that long for virus, if present, to replicate enough to show up on a test. And it's super important that once it's clear you have had a close exposure, to stay away from everyone in quarantine, most importantly your family. So close contact, as defined, is the key. A person with a non-close contact would be advised to carefully self-monitor. So if you have a close contact exposure unprotected, you are out of work 14 days. And during that time, the health department will follow along too. And here's something to be aware of. We've had cases where a person is positive, doesn't fully isolate from family. A family member gets ill around days 8 or 9. That person would have been cleared at day 10, but with further exposure, their clock starts over, another 14 days. And then additional family members get ill. And unless there has been proper isolation and quarantine, this is a new exposure. The clock starts again. That means for this person out of work almost a month, and we've seen it. So this is why you do not want to be exposed. This is why you want to be careful about isolation and quarantine. And it's also why you want to work with your colleagues to figure out the best way to avoid anyone being in close contact. Why is that? Because you have no way to tell who around you might be pre-symptomatic in that window before their symptoms start. This is why you want to wear a mask. Keep your distance. Avoid crowds. Limit being within 6 feet for more than 15 minutes with anyone unless you're protected. And this is why you want those around you to do the same. You can be out and about safely if we all act to reduce the risk. So share this with your colleagues and your loved ones. Take care of yourself and those around you. Be well and be careful, especially right now.